Season 2 of Andor has blasted off, but there are many things you may have missed. So this week on Star Wars Chit-Chat, I'm here with my guest Jack to review the 3 premiere episodes and fill you in on all the connections that I found and a lot more interesting information. Now, the Rakatan are actually creatures from Knights of the Old Republic. That's where they first came up. And I'll put an image on screen for all watchers where it's a TIE Avenger, which I'll lord up that when we're done talking about Cassian.
Please do, because I've got questions on that.
I wouldn't mind if they name drop Thrawn or something, but I'm hoping one of the collections is going to really collect with Rebels. You know, when I watched it with Megan, she got the vibe that Brasso was going to die when he talks to B2 Emo. She was like, something bad's going to happen. And I just jokingly said, I was like, it's Andor. Something bad is obviously going to happen. This is not a happy ending show. Those things do happen. And I think it's very important to show that the abuse of power happens in so many different ways, and that Bix needed to get out of the nightmare. Here with me this week, as I said, is Jack from I Am Jack's Musings, and he is from Back to the Filmography is where you know him the most, a fantastic podcast delving deep into, well, season 1 was Jason Statham, all the Jason Statham movies, and now he's in the McConaissance, in the Matthew McConaughey sphere. But Jack actually helped me with season 1 of Andor. We tag teamed quite a few episodes back, I think it was a couple of years ago now when that came out, of sort of alternating and having different guests on, because there were so many episodes, you know, I think it was like 10 weeks of Andor or something, whereas this time there's only 4 weeks and there is a lot to watch. But before we delve into that, let's just quickly ask Jack for a little recap of Andor season 1, and then we'll get into the episodes.
Well, I'll start by saying, you know, thanks. It's great to come back on, and I'm glad I watched that season 1 recap that Disney released, because that helped out a lot, didn't it? Because it does feel like quite a significant amount of time has passed, like real time. Obviously, we've got a year in the show, haven't we? But I guess I didn't need reminding, because it's entered the public sphere, as you said. It's like it's in the popular culture, isn't it? It's in the consciousness, particularly, you know, One Way Out is, but it seems to be the show that people are holding on to, I think, at the moment. It seems to be the show where, you know, Disney have ruined Star Wars, Disney have ruined Marvel. I don't agree with either of those statements, but where people are getting a little bit fatigued, which I can understand on an individual basis. That's fine, of course. This is the one that people still want to hold up, and I think rightly so. I think I'm sort of slightly, I don't know how I feel yet about this release schedule. I know what you said, you know, 10 weeks of episodes can be a lot to commit to. I quite like that kind of culture of waiting. I guess I'm old enough.
No, I do.
That's the culture I'm used to. Yeah. And, you know, there are some things you binge, like my partner, Emma, and I, we didn't watch any Daredevil until after episode 8. And then
it works really well to binge
maybe episode 7. And then we binged it all just in time to kind of get to watch the finale sort of the day after it was on. So, you know, I'm breaking my own rule even as I'm announcing it, I suppose. But yeah, I think I'm going to miss how long it lasts, because it makes it feel a bit more epic.
And people can catch up as well. Like, so a lot of people do what you do. I mean, I did it with Daredevil, to be honest. I think Daredevil Born Again, I can't remember if it premiered with 2 or 3 episodes, but I didn't start watching, I think, until the 4th episode. So I actually watched kind of like 1 to 5 in about a week. And then from episode 6, I kind of do that. But when Agatha All Along came out, Meg and I weren't fussed about that. And then Halloween came by and we were like, you know what, maybe we'll give it a go. And then, actually, it's kind of that thing, I think, when there's a show that you're not necessarily like gunning for, it's kind of like, oh, I quite enjoyed that episode. Hey, do you want to watch another one? Yeah, let's do it. We can. Whereas sometimes I found with a lot of Star Wars shows, Acolyte was the worst for it, where it takes quite a while to get going in certain episodes. And when you're like, you know what, I'm actually bought into this. And then it's like episode end. And you're like, well, I have to wait a week now to watch it. But equally, the weekly release schedule, if you're like that and you don't feel obliged to have to watch it constantly, you can do it at your own speed. And I think what you did is the best. I think realistically, for stuff that isn't Star Wars, just because I see so many spoilers, because the spheres I'm in, like a trailer comes out, I see every screenshot of it before I watch the damn thing. So I just have to, my algorithm has done that to me now. But I think that the best way to do it for most shows is, wait till it's about halfway through. And then you can kind of go your own pace. And if life gets in the way, doesn't really matter. But you do kind of have to, one does have to keep off social media now. It's kind of just a given.
Yeah. Which isn't really much of a curse nowadays anyway with most of them.
It's a blessing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was excited for season 2. I think it's the one, I think the same as everyone else. It's the one that I put in the highest I hold in the highest regard, I suppose. I don't think I've ever been quite as down as some people on some of them, and perhaps I've not been quite as hyped as some people. Maybe I've been coming in a little bit more in the middle. But Andor stays with you, doesn't it? Certain episodes, certain moments, what it's saying and what it's doing is a show that means something in the world. Like, clearly, and we're going to have to talk about it with these 3 episodes, they are social commentary at a time where what it's saying is really important. And I think some of the other shows are maybe a bit fan baity, or maybe are being done because they're characters that are popular, or they're trying something new out. You know, Skeleton Crew I thought was great.
Loved it. Good fun.
And it's always nice to be in the world, isn't it? Let's face it. But Andor feels like it's got something to say. So I think, I know you spoke about it quite a bit during season 1, this sense of it being prestige TV. It does feel that way. Like the budget and the framing of the shots at times and the mise en scène, and it being on a location and a mixture of that and the volume and all this stuff sort of adds to the kind of grandiosity, I suppose, of the show. It feels like it's something that's important in the world of Star Wars, but also feels like it's actually adding something to conversations in the real world.
Yeah, it's definitely got much more of a weight to it. It's always the show I say, Andor is the one show I never have to apologize for. It's, you know, I love Clone Wars. There's a lot of crap in Clone Wars. I love Rebels. It's a bit slow to get going. You know, Bad Batch is pretty good, but there's a lot of filler in there. Acolyte is incredibly uneven. Skeleton Crew is good fun, but it's a fun kids romp, basically, which is not a slight on it at all. It's such a fun thing, but it doesn't, as you say, it didn't stay with me in a certain way. There's a lot of important elements to it, I think, for a new generation of Star Wars. You know, especially with some of the characters, especially the one who's sort of got this cybernetic augmentation and things. Like, a lot of those things and character growth, incredibly important. But Andor is the one, I think, that, it's got, no matter what lens you put on, if you put on a political lens, if you put on a TV show lens, if you put on just from a writing standpoint lens, no matter how you consume your media content, as long as it's not, I purely want action non-stop, that's the only or humor, because it's not very funny. That's probably the only 2 ways I'd go, okay, if you're going into Andor thinking, I want a Star Wars comedy, wrong show, mate. And if you want going into Andor thinking, I want loads of crazy lightsaber battles, again, wrong show. But aside from that, really, I'd say it hits on all cylinders. And I think Born Again, actually, to a degree, I think, for me, Born Again has been almost the Andor of the MCU. As much as I've loved a lot of the MCU stuff, I think Born Again, for me, has been up in that level. There's a few more issues with Born Again than there were for Andor Season 1, I will say. Some of the dodgy MCU reshoot parts, maybe more so. But the rest of it, I think, again, social commentary is really weighted, and it's so clever. But these episodes... I
mean, I can't believe, sorry to interrupt, I can't believe how they got away with... I mean, this is in a positive way, of making a show about corrupt cops and a show about, you know, police with bad attitudes at this current time. I think it's amazing that they managed to do that. And I think we can probably talk about Andor saying some things about people in power in similar ways. You know, I think they're taking a swing, and they're willing to take the risk.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about in this. There's a lot of again, I'm going to be sprinkling in little bits of a kind of lore across this, of stuff that I found that's connecting to other things. But there's themes, characters, and certain scenes. One scene in particular that we will speak about. There will be, I'll give a light trigger warning, but that will probably be nearer the end of this. But let's delve in. So I think one of the things I probably want to talk about first, I think, is probably Mon Mothma. I think her whole scene, so how we'll do this, listeners and watchers, is going to be, we'll generally do it, not quite chronologically, but we're kind of going to dart upon location more so in certain characters. Otherwise, we're going to be going back and forth so much, it's going to get very confusing. So if you focus on Mon Mothma for the time being, a little bit. So you've got her journey. So this one is about her daughter's wedding that she obviously shipped off later to the gentleman's name is Davo, to essentially get herself out of financial trouble, to basically shield her donations, in air quotes, to the rebellion and get them to be cleansed, and the payment for that was selling off her daughter. And so this is an arena of Mon Mothma that she's not fully comfortable in, because in the last season we saw her around the political arena, and I think some of the Mon Mothma scenes in season 1 are some of the best scenes and some of the best writing and acting, not only in Star Wars, but I think on TV. I think in the way they say things without saying things, especially a lot of her conversations with Tay, which obviously in this, it ramps up to the nth degree. so much of what is being said is so much subtext. And it is so clever to know exactly what they're saying, and they don't use any of those words because they don't know who's listening. So I want to ask you, I'll put the baton to you. How did you feel about all this scene? What would you like to talk about first with Mothma? Do you want to talk about the wedding-y stuff and the ritual side of Chandrila? Do you want to talk about the political things? Like, what kind of drew you in of the Mon Mothma scenes?
I think Chandrila, maybe for me in these first 3 episodes, is the perfect place to start, because it kind of sums up how I feel about these 3 episodes. I think they're good. I'm starting at the end here, sorry.
No, please do.
I like this as an opening, but I don't love it, I don't think. It's done enough to start, but I'm not like totally won over yet. But then I don't need to be won over because I'm going to watch it all anyway. But I don't know, there was just... And I think Chandrila was part of that problem. I think that storyline, I understand we want to deepen the world. And I think all the stuff, as you said, with Tay and with Luthen and the kind of looks across the room or the little whispered conversations. I particularly loved the last conversation she had with Luthen. I wrote the dialogue down because I thought it mirrored the opening conversation between Andor and, is it Nia, I think, or something like that. I thought there was a mirroring there, which was very, very clever in terms of the writing. So I loved all of that stuff, but I'll be honest, some of it just felt like pootling around, and I don't really care enough about the other characters in her arc.
You're not a fan. You're not a fan of Perrin, then, the husband. No one is really that I know of.
Or the daughter, who's a right spoil little bitch.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of her.
Although, she's in a bad situation, don't get me wrong. She's being arranged off. That's not ideal. But she's not very nice. She's horrible to Mon. And we're always going to be on one side because we know what an important figure she is in the team that we are supporting in this galaxy. So, I don't know. I liked it. But at times I was just a bit like, oh, okay, they're walking up a hill, or okay, they're looking at a statue, or maybe it will become important later on. But there were certain moments where I just felt it was dragging a little bit, and I'd rather have got to like the kind of intriguey stuff as you were talking about. I really like the character that worked with Luthen.
Clea.
I think whenever she's on screen, she's great. So when she just sort of struts in, it's like, this is happening. I need to get a signal. And then I'm off again. I think she's great. I think she's got really good presence. So I think when they're doing any of the stuff that interconnects to the galaxy and the emerging resistance, I was all bought in, no matter who it was. But yeah, the wedding-y stuff, it was all right. How did you feel about it?
I enjoyed it because I'm such a fan of Mon, and I think Genevieve O'Reilly is arguably the strongest actor in the show. Yeah. She was so, because she was only in deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith, really, only all her speaking roles are in deleted scenes, which I've only watched a couple of times. And then in Rogue One, she was in a bit, but again, didn't really get to shine that much. She did some of the voice work for Mon, I think, in Rebels. I don't think she did for Clone Wars. And then, Andor comes around, and she really gets to shine, which I love. And I think her acting and her mannerisms, especially in episode 3, phenomenal, like next level. And I think with these episodes, with the wedding stuff, I think kind of for me, these 3 episodes, I think one thing we have to remember, and I'm not trying to be a Star Wars apologist, but I'm sure I will be, is the first 3 episodes of Andor season 1 are probably the weakest episodes by quite a lot. Yeah. And I rewatched all of Andor over the last year or so, and they're good, but they're not amazing. And I think these 3 are a lot stronger than the first 3 of season 1. But I think what we have to look at it is that all of Mon's scenes are specifically trying to be the other side of the coin with what's going on in the actual galaxy. And I think that's really what's being shown. That was in season 1 a lot more. But in this, you're seeing like people are dying. The Empire's taking over. There's rebels who are having to hide and change their names and potentially, fully getting assaulted, which we'll get to.
Everywhere, as you said, isn't it?
Everywhere except in the elite. They're the only ones who can waste their time fanning around, walking up a hill and focusing on these rituals, which again, culturally, they're important to them. And I'm not trying to say that because suffering's going on in the world, people aren't allowed to, I got married last year and the world's on fire. That, you can't, I'm not saying that is a reflection on us and you shouldn't be able to do these things. Because Perrin's speech, although he's a massive dick, but he does wear his clothes very well. He is a dickhead. His speech was very good, and it is about basically everything is quite shit, but you've got to find your moments. You've got to find these things that really kind of keep you going. 90% of life can be boring in queues or working a job you don't like, but you have that moment with your child or your partner or a friend, and it makes the last several hours of horseshit worth it. And I think that what this is trying to show is two things. One is the corporate elite and how they're kind of acting, and how it's like none of them seem to be very worried or even really talking about the Empire. Unlike in season 1, where a lot of Mon's conversations was kind of like, oh, we're talking about this and what we can do there. And every now and then a little conversation will come. Did you hear what the Empire were doing? Yes, I've got the Gormans. And then it'll come back. And slowly the noise about what the Empire's doing got louder and louder and louder. In this, there's none of that, except Luthen. He's the only one. And you saw her shock there. And she's like, I just want this. I need to focus. She has tunnel vision quite a lot. And I think for most of her life, she's been tunnel vision on being a senator. And then the rebellion. And now it's her wedding, or her daughter's wedding. So it's her hyper-focus. And the thing that I liked the most about these is, although there are parts that are middling, I really am intrigued by how one writes this stuff in the second episode, where you've got the big circle and they go in there, and it's like a whole thing.
I invite you in to my circle, and all this kind of stuff. It
works, doesn't it? Conceptually, as a thing, it works. I've got a particular
dance they all do,
and I'm sure it's inspired by something, and I found it interesting. But again, it wasn't the bit that really drew me in. But really, it's that last scene I think is so powerful.
Oh, it's so good
when she's drinking, because I rewatched that because basically Megan can't watch 3 episodes of Andor in a night. She doesn't have it in her because she just gets tired, which is fine. So we're basically doing is we're watching as much as we can each Wednesday, and then she'll go to bed and I'll finish it off, and then we'll try and see what we can watch Thursday or Friday. So I rewatched episode 3 today with her. And I was really thinking about it, and Megan was like, oh, Mon's knocking him back a bit. And I was like, yeah, she is. And then you see her in that dance, and it's really showing the chaos of the galaxy is everything's falling apart around her. And I think it's showing that her relationship with her family from here is really changing. She sent off her daughter. Perrin's like, you were cheating on me with Tay. I don't really care, but you were probably doing it. And she's like, well, I wasn't. But clearly it's like he doesn't care about her in that way. And his speech is quite an attack on her, even though it's bolstering up later. It was basically saying, I'm miserable and unhappy. But there's moments you can be okay with. But marriage sucks, really. And so I think this episode really just serves to go, next collection of episodes, minor spoiler, but each collection of episodes is 1 year after the other. And so I think next year when we see, as in next year in universe, when we see Mon, we're not really going to see her family again. We might see him a bit, and next year might be the full disconnect. But I think it's really showing that how she disconnects herself from her family into the rebellion. And I think this was her last chance to kind of try and connect with her daughter. And this whole moment of her dance is like, there's nothing here for me anymore, as well as obviously what happened with Tay. That was kind of my interpretation of it. I know I just spouted a lot.
I think, no, not at all. I think you're absolutely correct in everything you said. I guess I feel about this quadrant of the story, and it's similar to I do to Cassian's, unfortunately. I feel like, although he's quite lost in this story, where she is the central figure, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. But I feel like both their arcs in these 3 episodes, 3 episodes was just a bit too long for both of them. There wasn't enough to fill their quarter, I don't think.
That's a good point.
So I agree with everything you're saying, but I think maybe that could have been done in 1 episode or 1.5 episodes. So there were moments where I did feel like, okay, this is kind of cool seeing this cultural thing, but then Mon and Tay are having the same conversation again. I got it the first time. So yeah, it just felt a little bit fillery at times. I think you're right. The moment of her letting go is great, and the dance and the cut to black was really strong. I thought it was really interesting that maybe it's a small thing and it means absolutely nothing, but when they all came into the circle, Mon and the 2 parents, I'm afraid I don't know their names of the son.
No idea.
Davo's
one of them.
They were all wearing gold, and Perrin was in his blue. I didn't know if there was meant to be something symbolic going on there, because he's outside of the. I don't know, but I found that quite interesting. And like I said, all the Luthen stuff, and particularly the final. I don't know if we're going to talk about that in more depth later, but the final interaction between them. So as you said, it's that basically Tay keeps shooting his mouth off, and he keeps getting drunk, and he's just proving himself to be untrustworthy. And they're having this. This is their second conversation. This is where I think between Luthen and Mon, this second conversation works because it's the build. It's the build to the inevitable. We know what's coming, and I love the way that she said to him, "I'm not sure what you're saying," and just the way he looks at it is so cold. But I mean, this is where Stellan Skarsgård is the absolute boss of this show, when he manages to switch between his two personas, and he's just like, "How nice for you," and this just sense of like. The whole audience knows, she does really know, but she wants to deny it to herself, that guy is fucked. He's about to just get murdered.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was such a powerful moment of like, this is what it takes to be a true rebel. If we're going to win this fight, we've got to do the dirty stuff as well. And I think these 3 episodes and the show in general is a lot about muddying that water, isn't it? And we definitely see it here of like, you've got to do bad things sometimes for the greater good to win the bigger fight. And I think that's what that dancing was about, wasn't it? She has accepted, I'm going to let go. I'm going to let this happen rather than run off and try and figure it out. Yeah, I think everything you said is really interesting and right. I just felt like it was a bit of a drag at times. I just wanted it to move on maybe a bit quicker.
Which is completely fair. And I'll throw some of my lore dump here, and then I'll let you choose which of the quadrants we want to go into next. Nice. So you said quadrant earlier, so I'm going to steal that. So a couple of little things here. So one thing is the song that was playing while she was dancing. Phenomenal. So it's actually a remix of a song called Niamos. Now, Niamos, the party mix, was actually in the Andor episode, I think the announcement, when he's on Niamos and he gets nicked by the
party planet type place.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I listen to the soundtrack of Andor quite a lot. I've got a playlist of music I listen to when I'm working from home, primarily instrumental music and stuff. And the Andor soundtrack is phenomenal. And so Niamos is my favorite song, and it genuinely, I encourage everyone to go onto Spotify or whatever streaming service you use, or maybe it's on, you can buy it, I don't know. But Niamos, Niamos, party mix. Listen to it once through. It's like 1 minute or 2 minutes long. It's really, really good. This is like another mix of it, even more of a party mix. So this isn't out yet. I don't think this soundtrack as a recording, but it'll be out soon. So I loved that. I was like, oh, my favorite Andor song is coming back.
So before you move on, that's interesting, isn't it? Because if that's playing whilst he is is it in that scene when he's getting arrested?
Yes. Yeah. It's when he's on the beach and stuff. It's playing in the background.
Yeah.
I think it's playing you're the film studies person.
So it's diegetic, like
diegetic.
Yeah. I think I remember that. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I don't think this show does anything by accident. This is a very deliberate show. So he is being incarcerated, and this song is in the background, and now it's in the background for her while she's feeling. That. Or
she's letting Tay get taken away.
Yeah, but perhaps she's feeling trapped. She's feeling herself like kind of incarcerated in this. She's lifestyle. Gone down this path now. This is what the only option she's got left, because as you said, her family's gone. The Senate is crumbling. All she has left is this. Yeah, really interesting. I like that. Nice.
So I loved that. And the other thing is I want to delve a little bit deeper into what was said about the Chandi Merle, so the statue, where there were 12 of them, but they were lost. 9 have been found. 8 had been found. This is the 9th, and then 5 are back to Chandrila, so now 6. So Darvo mentions a couple of things in that, but the main thing I want to mention is Rakatan. So Rakatan is mentioned. So 25,000 years ago, the Rakatan invaders took over Chandrila. Now, the Rakatan are actually creatures from Knights of the Old Republic. That's where they first came up. And I'll put an image on screen for all watchers where they have like an oblongy head. They don't look far removed from Mon Calamari, like Admiral Akbar, but they've got eyes on stalks. And so cool. They're in Knights of the Republic a bit, but they're actually where their origins sort of were is Dawn of the Jedi. So there's 16 technically comics and 1 book, which is about the Jedi Order called the Jedi. Je'Dai, and that was way before sort of hyperspace was really a thing, before lightsabers were a thing, and it's like the oldest of the old that Legends continuity went back to. And the Rakatan Empire took over everything. They invented or found out about hyperspace. They created a weapon called the Starforge, which I think is a main part of Knights of the Old Republic, and they were the empire of the earliest recorded empire in Legends continuity. And they took over, and they used to kill entire worlds. They would seek out Force sensitive worlds, and they would essentially kill almost everyone, enslave enslave all the strongest Force users and use them as essentially Force slaves. I think they were called Force dogs or something. And often drug them up and torture them to basically make them out of their will. And they went across the universe doing this for thousands of years. And then in Dawn of the Jedi, some of the comics, things get shaken up a bit. And then over the millennia of this happening, like very long ago. So they were a major player in that. And I don't know, I think it was just a throwaway line because Andor does occasionally touch on legend stuff, which is what I love. I mean, lots of canon content does, but it's an interesting connection I think a lot of people probably missed. And also what's interesting is they said 25,000 years ago things happened to Chandrila. Well, the Dawn of the Jedi movie that's been announced, made by, I think it's James Mangold, the guy who made Logan, that is going to be 25,000 years ago. And that's the Dawn of the Jedi. So who knows? Maybe that's going to somehow connect to the Rakatan Empire or Chandrila in some way, or maybe it's just going to be, you know, what I like is when the movies get announced and created, there's often some connecting content. So maybe there's going to be a movie about Dawn of the Jedi, it's going to be about something completely different, and then maybe we'll get a little book about Chandrila or a comic series. I just want to make that connection there of the Rakatan, because I was like, oh, I know those. I was like, are they from Dawn of the Jedi? And I did some research and I was like, yes. Whenever I hear certain things that remind me, a little light bulb flicks in my head. So I want to make that connection. So back to you, good sir. Which area of Andor do you want to talk about next? What gets your fancy?
Well, we mentioned Cassian's arc, didn't we? So should we talk about him? But I just want to say before we moved on, space disco balls. Cool.
It's very cool, isn't it? Space
DJ disco balls. Oh, they look disconcertingly like the torture droid.
I think that's probably intentional.
Yeah, is that what becomes? Does the space disco ball get co-opted by the Empire? And do they steal the plans for it, the blueprints, and turn it into a torture droid?
Or maybe there's no disco droids left, and this is the last one because the Empire is so dour. I mean, you know, that could be a whole like fan fictiony story, couldn't it? Like the last disco droid.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing.
It was cool though when it came out, wasn't it? And just the music started pumping, and it's like a little spinning mirror ball, and I was well into it. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree completely.
Yes, Cassian's story starts great, drags, ends great. That's how I felt about it. And I get it. Again, I think it's like the Mon stuff in the wedding. The bit in the middle when he's on. Are we saying it now, or are we saying it as a big reveal like the show tried to do?
For spoiler for everyone, this is all going to be spoilers. Everything that's going to be either lore dumps or information spread across, so you can say it, give you the glory.
So he's meant to be meeting up, isn't he, with a contact, and it ends up... I quite like the reveals, because it went quite nicely on Yavin 4. That stuff, I get it. You know, the rebellion, the factions need to be unified. Okay, fine. The point well made. But again, it just sort of went on a bit and on a bit and on a bit, and we had these monsters that didn't really amount to much as well. I think it was interesting to see him and how he handled the situation. I think we're seeing a much more mature Cassian here, for the most part, until kind of a moment in episode 3, maybe. So again, I like the character development. I like what it's trying to say, but I think it just needed to move forwards a bit quicker for me.
Yeah, I get what you're saying completely. The thing is, Mon's story was clearly 3 parts, but it did feel like Andor's was actually 2. It was really like there was the first little part, almost the prologue,
like a little Bond movie, like pre-credit sequence, which is really cool. I really liked that, and I wonder what happened to Nia as well. But then he does that, and I like him trying to figure out the TIE fighter thing, or it's the TIE Avenger, which I'll lord on that when we're done talking about Cassian. Please do, because I've got questions on that, because it's that classic, slightly problematic thing where there's something better than we've already seen. Why have we not seen it?
It's a prototype. It's kind of like a TIE Interceptor thing. They were in Legends, but I'll get into that in a bit. I'll tease you, little friends, to keep on listening. But yeah, I like that bit and him kind of figuring it out, which was good and showing how difficult and complicated it was. I love seeing it up close, like that stuff. But then
there was a little bit of comedy there, wasn't there, to be fair? And that opening scene, a little kind of slapsticky.
Well, like the original trilogy humour, one thing Scott and I, when we were talking, I think when we first connected, me, Scott, and Chris and Dave did the big collaboration years ago in the Road to Rise of Skywalker, and we all kind of, on our own respective feeds, we all tackled sort of a collection of films. And one thing that Scott said about the sequel trilogy, and to be fair, the prequels as well, is the humour doesn't land in the same way as the original trilogy. The original trilogy is like humorous. You get a little quip here and there from Han, and then you've got like kind of funny-ish things that just kind of happen that are humorous, but not like, here's a joke. In the prequels, it was trying so hard to be like, this is funny, Jar Jar funny, and it's just not. And then the sequels is just all quips. Just quip.
Yeah.
Like, I think in Rise of Skywalker, although it's the worst film of the sequels in my opinion, I think that 3PO is the best in that, and he's the funniest in that, and he's great comic relief in that. But I think that Andor is the least funny Star Wars content that exists, but it does have the humour. Where it has a moment where it's like, this is really intense. Oh, that didn't go as I expected. Oh, that's a little bit funny, but we've got to focus. Rather than it being like, oh, it's all goofy. So I do agree with you there with the humour of it. But I think at Andor, when he then crash lands and stuff, that story kind of gets wrapped up, and then episode 3, he's off doing something else. So it almost feels like 3 different stories that are not on the same time span as everything else going on.
That's
you
true.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it does feel a bit disjointed. I liked the scenes when he's on the Rebel planet, Yavin 4, and I loved what, again, it's like the Mon stuff. I love what it was saying. I love that I've got written down that it really shows that the rebels have to work together to win and not squabble over the little things. They cannot. The only way the rebellion can conceivably win is if all these little pieces that we obviously see in Star Wars Rebels come together and actually unified make a decision. And this really showed that even if you have people with good intentions, they squabble over stupid things and will just kill each other, and the Empire doesn't really need to worry about them. So I love that element. But yeah, in episode 2, when they were all just talking, about, do we get this person? Do we get that person? I don't trust this person. And the amount of times someone said, I don't trust them. What are they doing over there? I was just like, I get it. Okay. I understand what you're saying. I don't need to be hit over the head with it, figuratively or literally. And then the monster reveals, you say, it was like, oh, it's a big warthoggy thing for 1 second. Oh no, there's a monster. What's it doing? Killing people. Okay. And it's gone. And you're like, but I think what it was kind of showing for me is what I liked about it. Again, I think his is probably the weakest of all this stuff. When it went back to him, I was like, this is the part I'm the least interested by, because I know we all know it's going to go. That's the problem with Andor stuff. Andor, I know we know where Mon is going to end up because she survives, but we're learning a lot about her that we didn't know. With Andor, it's like every time he's on screen, I'm like, well, nothing bad's going to happen to him, because we know by Rogue One he's fine. So it's like you really have to make everyone around him interesting or add lore, which I think really happened with the heist arc, the crew around him, and what it meant for the Empire afterwards, the prison arc, Kino Loy and the group of people he was with. How's he going to get out of this? Narkina 5.
Yeah.
So,
it's about personal growth for him, isn't it? It's about how he becomes the guy we saw in Rogue One.
Yeah, and I think this arc shows it a bit where it really shows he's so much more elevated than all these other like young rebels. These are all like green rebels. They've barely been in the fight for long. They have no idea what they're doing. They're squabbling over stupid things. When it's raining, he is like, we need to collect the rainwater. They're not even thinking about that. They're arguing about the food that's moldy or this, and it's like you're worrying about things that seem, when you think you know what you're talking about, we all get it probably in our jobs and stuff. When you get someone who's new and they hyper focus on something and you go, this isn't the thing you're worrying about. You're focusing on the wrong detail. You need to worry about this thing as the bigger picture. So I think it shows that well, but I would be inclined to agree. I think most of Andor's stuff outside of the cockpit was
it's a shame.
Interesting.
I mean, I think he's a very centre character, Cassian shoots first, that's for sure. He's not afraid, is he? Which I quite like. He's ruthless, which I guess we saw in the pilot, to be fair, as well, didn't we? When he needs to, he'll take the shot. I guess it's a shame, it's a show called Andor. He's the central figure that all of this is revolving around, and I think it's done a really good job of building, as you said, a great ensemble around it. But yeah, he felt a bit lost in this opening of a show that holds his name. Because even when he gets his kind of big moment, so once he's taken back off again, once he gets himself back onto the shuttle or onto the, would you call it a TIE Avenger? Sorry, onto the TIE Avenger. And then he manages to make contact with
Claire.
Oh, thanks, I'm bad with names tonight. With Claire. The old Andor sort of comes out a little bit, doesn't it? The impetuousness of like, she's trying to explain to him calmly, you can't get, but she's also trying to talk in that, you were saying, put that idea of like code. I can't just say things because in case somebody's listening. So I'm going to talk in code. And he's just like, no, this, and that planet. And you can sort of see the growing frustration in her. And he just sort of impetuously races off to the planet. I guess ultimately in that kind of hero's journey in a good way, because he needs to be there for those moments. But that's where we are seeing that interesting two sides of his character, who he was before, this kind of person who acts before he thinks, and then who he's becoming, which is this very, as you said, seasoned, mature person within this rebellion.
To counter that, in Rogue One, him being brash and going against two groups of people who are squabbling over, do we go to Scarif? Do we do this? Well, the Empire's got a super weapon. We're all going to die. Blah, blah, blah. So much talking, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, fuck this. Jin wants to do action. Let's go and do something. And that, I feel like, is mirrored here very much in his arc, which is like, no, I'm not going to, I know you've got this big political thing. I'm going to do what I know in my gut is right. And I'm going to do action. And again, it gets people in a lot of trouble. It's the Anakin Skywalker thing that he does all the time. But I think occasionally you do need that. And I think it is, again, this arc is kind of showing where he knows when to be patient when all these people are squabbling. But as soon as his opening comes, he goes for it. And I think that's the balancing act he's kind of going to jump off your point.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The bits I always like is like some of the Empire stuff, as you said, we're going to have to talk about it. It's pretty dark, to be fair. But like they're sort of in control, quote unquote, of this planet. And then he turns up and he's got a shuttle, and like they've shut off communications, and it's like nobody can get in or out. And then you've got space, which is massive. Obviously, it's space. It's a galaxy far, far away, and it's many galaxies. And one teeny tiny little Star Destroyer, and he just flies up and he's like, well, yeah, I can get past that. Fuck it. And he just like flies down onto the planet. I kind of really like those moments where like we hear all this stuff about control, and we do see it obviously in terms of on a person to person level, but like we're in control of this planet and it's just one Star Destroyer. Well, of course, one shuttle can just skim away and get through. And that moment when he comes down, he starts blasting the shit out of the very fascist looking tanks and fascist looking Imperials. It's like watching Inglourious Bastards or something. It was really cool. And I think pays off that arc, which I guess maybe we could talk about next, that arc on
I think Mina-Rau.
Mina-Rau, yeah, like the Rebel Moon Croc planet. Yeah, that was sort of a nice end to the arc. So I liked how they bled in together. And I think, you know, what you're saying is right. That's really interesting. Maybe this prototype ship, again, is kind of symbolic of him and who he is. He's still he's a prototype for Axis, isn't he? For Luthen, he's pushing him. He's the sort of person he wants to be fronting the rebellion, but it's still at that nascent stage where he's training Cassian up to be who he's supposed to be. This is a prototype ship being flown by a prototype rebel. That's just nice symmetry there. And you know, I spoke at the start about his conversation. That was so good. Is it with Nia? Did you say with the new? She's sort of given up information and she's got him onto the base. She's getting him into this ship. And then she's starting to worry about what's going to happen, about whether she's going to get caught, the fact she's going to lose her job. She's actually, in some ways, really enjoyed her time there. I thought that was a really nice touch, but she knows this is the right thing to do. Again, adding those shades, I thought was so interesting, that conversation. And then I wrote down what he said. He said something like, you're coming home to yourself. You're overcoming your fear. Let that protect you. It was such a, you know, that it's like a poster in a doctor's surgery or something with a beautiful image behind it. You know, it's like I'm being a bit glib there, but it was a really good moment for him as a character and really showed what the rebellion is about. I thought that was a really powerful moment too. And that's where that book ending I thought worked really well. He's bringing in a new person to the rebellion in this kind of positive way. What you're doing is right for you, but it's also right for the bigger fight. And that was really powerful. Each individual person that can step up and do the right thing will make a big difference. He's telling her there. And then you've got, at the end, Luthen saying to Mon, yeah, you keep sticking your head in the sand and we'll do the dirty work. So yeah, there was lots and lots and lots of good stuff. Started well, ended well. I guess maybe a bit like the other arc we've been talking about already, just felt like it trod water in the middle. And what you said was really interesting. Now I've thought about it as we've been talking. Timelines. Like, how long is that wedding? It felt like, as you said, 2 or 3 days, maybe.
That's what they said at the start of the first episode.
He just tied up in a broken down shuttle. Well,
I think he said he left. He said in episode 1 that he left the planet with when he left Porco, or whatever the guy's name was, and then come back and said, "You guys have been here for 2 days, haven't you? How would you know that?" Well, I was here 3 days ago, and you weren't.
Right? Yeah,
so
yeah.
It has to have been, and so I think it is meant to be 3 days. because they say the Chandrila wedding, it's a 3-day process.
I guess he's flying around in the shuttle, isn't he? Does it have hyperspace capabilities? I don't know. We never see it being used, do we? So that would take longer to fly around from planet to planet.
He does have hyperspace in the TIE Avenger because when he talks to Clea and she talks and then it suddenly cuts off, that's when he shoots off.
Oh, he shot off. Okay,
but I don't know when he's like hot wiring the ship at the end of the second episode, and because he says I've been stuck upside down for 2 days, and I'm like, have you been physically stuck in the ship for 2 days then, or are you just saying the term upside down as a code word, like you've been
right?
Because I was like, on the planet, it felt like he was there for ages, but I think there was only one night because they said that's when the monsters come out. So I think he was only on the planet for 12 hours or so.
We're even having to try and figure it out. That's not great. It should be clear to us. Yeah, I thought. I mean, the balls of the guy to start hot wiring this prototype.
Yeah.
Like, all right, mate. Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you're about to do. Set off some like special new rocket or some self-destructs or like, I'll do it because I need to communicate. I mean, he goes for it, to be fair to him.
Yeah, he is. I think I spoke with a shout out to Reckless Rebellion. So Thomas Rochester, who I normally have on these weekly discussion shows, who's as passionate about Star Wars as I am. But because of the scheduling, we were like, it's not possible for us to both do our respective pods and do one together. So I was on there in the start of April, and I'll put a link in the description. And we discussed the prison arc. So him and his two co-hosts, they are going through the Andor. They did an Andor sort of pre-watch of each of the arcs. And I had a great time chatting with them. And one conclusion I came to while we were all discussing things was Andor's journey in season 1, it clicks at the end of the heist arc, and it shows in the prison arc. He's like the ultimate support character in a sense that he's never really actually front and center. He shows people how to be their best. And I think Luthen uses people and weaponizes them to be the best for the rebellion. Whereas I think Andor makes people better people. And I think that's what Marva tries to do a bit as well. And I just want to say her speech, I rewatched it. I rewatched it, the episode, and I rewatched it on my phone because you can watch all the monologues from season 1 of Andor, which I encourage, Kino Loy's, Luthen Rails, but Marva's. And she's going, I've been sleeping. We've been sleeping. When she's talking about the Empire in the season finale. I was like, oh, it's so good. But I think Andor, he brings out the best fighters in people. He does it in the prison arc. He does it with Kino Loy. He does it with Melshi and some of the others. And in this, he's trying to do it. In these episodes, he's trying to say to people, you need to think about this. Have you thought about the perimeter? Why haven't you captured rainwater? Think about all these things that you're not doing that you need to do. And they are not listening. They are tone deaf. They are just focusing on too much on the other people want my things. And it's like, you can't think like that. So I think he's the ultimate support character. And I think it's really him learning into that role. And I would not be surprised. I've not seen, some people were privy and got to see all the seasons of Andor, a lot of the bigger Star Wars influencers. I'm not one of those people. I've avoided all rumours and all leaks and everything. So I do not know. I'm just certain there's going to be a big Saw Gerrera arc, because Saw Gerrera, and there's going to be a big Mon Mothma arc, because of the Gorman massacre and what we know about in Star Wars Rebels in the Secret Cargo episode. But I would not be surprised if Andor has a whole period of time with Saw Gerrera and his partisans, and he bolsters them in a certain way. I think this was him trying and people not listening, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens again, but he gets in a situation where people are willing to listen. And I think that'll really show his prowess. And then when you get to Rogue One, it's like, oh, I can see why people around him did so well on Scarif. How they went against all odds is probably partly because of him.
The faction that's on Yavin 4, I didn't know this, obviously, but then reading afterwards, they're, was it Mal or May or Maya or something? They were like saying we've been working with her, and that she was mentioned as being an offshoot of Saw Gerrera, wasn't she, as well? I think.
Okay. I didn't. I've not watched any breakdown videos or connect the dots videos after this, so I'm not. If you say it, I completely believe you, because that's one of the pieces. I meant to look that up, actually. I remember now, and I've completely forgot. I was rewinding things, going, I was meant to look up something, but
I think she is mentioned in Andor season 1 as being somebody who's like even too extreme for Saw.
Oh, okay.
If what I read was right, and if I remember rightly.
Well, I'll have a little gander into that, but I'll say I want to mention about the TIE Fighter, and then we can get into one of the other elements. So the TIE Fighter thing itself, so TIE Avenger. So essentially, it's almost like the cousin of the TIE Interceptor. Because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it looks like a TIE Interceptor. But then it started firing, and then the back of it looks different. And I was like, okay, it's not a TIE Interceptor. So generally, you've got a TIE Fighter, standard, cheap, no shields, easy. You've got the TIE Interceptor, which, again, doesn't have shields, but is way faster, way more sleek, better cannons, and I believe has missile lock and stuff as well on it. But then you've got the TIE Fighter Advanced, which is what Vader has, which is, his is like an adapted one, but it's bigger, it's chunkier, it's generally a bit slower, but it usually has better shielding and better weapons and stuff. And so this is the TIE Avenger. So it's a type of TIE Advanced. It's in Legends a little bit. It's in the X-Wing books, which are quite popular, and they're in the 90s. And I think written by Michael Stackpole, if memory serves. And there are a lot about Wedge Antilles and the rebellion that it becomes the New Republic after Return of the Jedi. But in Legends continuity, the Empire's still around for like 10, 15 years, I think, after the Emperor dies. Whereas obviously in canon, it's like a year and a half, and then it's just the Imperial Remnant for a while, and then the Mandoverse stuff, obviously, which is a few years after that. But the TIE Advanced, the TIE Avenger is a prototype thing, which partly it will connect in with the TIE Defender project. So I don't know if Thrawn is ever gonna pop up in Andor. I kind of hope not, but he might, because obviously in Star Wars Rebels, Thrawn was such a massive part of that, and the TIE Defender project was a big thing he pushed for. In the Thrawn books, he was saying, we don't need another Death Star. It was a folly. It was a waste of time and resources. We need a better fleet. The way the rebels keep beating us is because one ship manages to outmaneuver our pilots. So if we don't need better pilots, we need better ships. We don't need to waste all these resources on one thing that can get destroyed. We need to distribute it and improve our stuff. So Thrawn in Rebels, his whole thing was the TIE Defender project. It was like a TIE fighter that had like a laser cannon and missile locks and a better shooting thing and also a reflector shield, and it was quite expensive. And what happens in one of the Thrawn books, Thrawn Treason, is essentially him and Orson Krennic, who obviously is in this, played by Ben Mendelsohn. They are at odds at each other because they're trying to vie for this resource that the Empire has, money, and essentially, Krennic wins because the Death Star gets made. But with Thrawn's argument story for the Defender, he knows the Death Star's being made. He finds out about it. He's not around when Death Star 1 explodes, but he predicts what's going to happen. He's like, they're going to find a way, because they're going to. So he's always like, no, TIE Defenders. And he fails. And so this is kind of like almost part of that project. I don't think it's directly the TIE Defender project, but it's essentially the Empire trying to experiment to make better TIE fighters that don't cost a ridiculous amount of money, but that are going to be effective. And that's what the TIE Avenger is. It's a type of TIE Advanced. So that's kind of where that comes into play, which I like. But again, it does always have that problem of, how many of these were made? Is this going to be a major plot line in the next, is the next collection of Andor episodes, are they going to be all about these TIE fighters? And then Andor will just happen to have a special thing on it. Are they never going to pop up again? It's always the prequel issue, is you can't have better tech.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? And you can't avoid it, unfortunately. I guess it feels like it needs to have something more, because there's no point just stealing one fighter, much as we saw in Rogue One. You need the blueprints, right? There's no point stealing one, because they will just make some more. So whether it's a way that they're going to use it to work out how to disable them or to get through the shielding or what, it feels like that needs to go somewhere. Otherwise it's a bit of a dead plot line, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm interested to see where it goes. I wouldn't mind if they name drop Thrawn or something, but I'm hoping one of the collections is going to really collect with Rebels, because Mon Mothma's speech on the Gormans is a major part of Rebels, and they can't not do it in Andor. So I don't think that'll be the next collection. I think that's going to be the penultimate ones. But where would you like to go from here? There's the Mina-Rau parts with Bix and etc., or there's the Dedra and Syril stuff. Which of the two? Where would you like to go from here?
Should we Mina-Rau, as we've sort of already touched upon it? And I think maybe it'd be interesting to end on how we both feel about Syril and Dedra.
As Megan calls him, Cereal, because he's obviously obsessed with cereal. His name's Cyril. She always calls him Cereal Boy. Yeah, we can go to Mina-Rau. So we'll eventually touch upon it. But obviously, there is a scene in this episode, in the final episode of sexual assault. So this will be a trigger warning. We are going to speak about that, but we're not quite there. We'll be there shortly, just to warn anyone listening. So what stood out to you with this? Where do you want to go in Mina-Rau?
I think this was one of the I think this was probably the most interesting arc, because even when people are just kind of pootling around, it feels Star Warsy.
Yeah.
It's crops rather than moisture, but it has that feel, doesn't it? And I think them in hiding, them trying to figure out a new life, you trying to understand how much the people that are, I guess, naturalized citizens of this planet are protecting them, or whether they are people you can trust or not. It has that kind of refugee angle, I suppose, which, we were talking at the top of this about social commentary and topicalness. Well, right here, these are people who others want out, others want to protect, that are being hunted for by an evil government. Doesn't sound like anywhere I know or that we live. So, yeah, I thought this was really interesting. And I think all the people they've collected together, well, not all the people. Obviously, you've got Cassian. I know he's not there on planet, but he's part of this crew. Bix is a really interesting character, and to see where she's going post season 1 and what the torture has done to her, I think they've handled that sensitively and well. As we've established, I'm shit with names tonight. Who's the main beefy dude?
Like Brasso, my boy.
Brasso, thank you. Yeah. That's stuff that you use to clean copper, isn't it? I think,
Brasso. Brasso. Yeah. I think also Andor, not that appearance is a major thing, but I think everyone in Andor is just quite good looking as well. Sure. And I just think when I see Brasso, I'm like, you're so he's ruggedly attractive in the way he's like homely attractive. He's like husband material. Whenever I see him, I'm like, oh, I wish you were like my uncle. Just a hug or something from Brasso would just be what I want. But sorry, a random little tangent.
No, it's true. So I think all that's working for me. You've spoken before about dirty sci-fi and all the kits all run down and needs to be fixed, and it feels Star Wars. It feels Star Warsy. So I like all that stuff, and I think you get to see how Brasso is ingratiating himself to the people, how Bix is struggling to overcome what's happened to her. She's suffering from nightmares, and she's going to get a hard way to do it, but she's going to get a way to probably, hopefully, move past what's happened to her. She seems to find some strength at a time where maybe many others wouldn't, as you said, quite a triggering moment of the show. But also they're kind of, the loyalty to each other is really nice. They're constantly asking where Cassian is, and they wouldn't go without him. And yeah, it's a nice plot line, I think, because it feels entrenched in what I consider like core Star Wars, I suppose. And not Nazis, basically space Nazis. I mean, it's the big joke, isn't it? That's what the Empire are. But the guys who come to planet, they're doing a census, I think, is what they say. Whether it's really that, or whether somebody has called in that there's rebels here on the planet, they've got to find them, or what, we don't ever really find out. I think that's interesting. But they are proper in this little arc. They are full-on space Nazis. The way they dress, the tanks they drive, the behavior they show in terms of that roll into, this could be like a French town, right? They roll into this French town and then they get to do whatever they want. That's why I said that Inglourious Bastards comment earlier.
Census, I mean, they took note of who the Jews were.
So all of it's really strong, I think. And this, for me, is the most successful arc because it feels like it's got the most to say.
Yeah, I agree. It feels... I think one of the things of Andor is a lot of the elements of Andor feel like you could extract certain storylines, release them as a hour-long special or something, and it would work. And even if you don't mention the word Star Wars, certain things, especially in season 1 of Andor, like that, the prison arc, if you just took that and you released that as a short film, because I think you put more together, probably about 40 minutes or something, and you didn't mention the Empire, you changed the word, and then you changed certain Star Wars-y words, and you just released that as its own thing, people would go, this is phenomenal, great social commentary, thrilling. And I think that's what this is as well. Agreed with everything you said there. I think it is, people just want to be left alone. But what are people going to do? Is this farmer whose friends, is he going to rat out his friends to save his family? Or is he going to, are you going to be the person to let Anne Frank hide in your attic? Or are you going to be the person who's saying there's weird noises coming from my neighbor's house? Which of those people are you going to be and why? And I think there's a lot to say there. And I think the Nazi imagery is certainly apparent there. And it's tough, isn't it? Because with the characters, I find I kept having to write down certain names because Brasso I love, and Bix is incredible, but Will is the one whose name I had to write down because I completely forgot his name.
He's the teenage boy, basically.
Yeah. I'm lukewarm on him.
Indifferent, yeah.
Yeah, I hope he gets a bit more to him. I was concerned he was going to die, and I was like, I don't want him to die. I don't want anyone to die. And then, spoiler alert, Brasso dies. I was like, I don't want him to die. I loved him, So I think what this does as well is that there's the rule we all know. By Rogue One, not everyone in Andor is going to be there. I'm not saying Bix is going to die. I have a suspicion she's going to survive, and we're going to maybe even see like the last scene in Andor might be her just after Rogue One, which would be quite like see what happened. Like almost everything ends, and then right at the end you see her reacting to the Death Star blowing up. That would be a real nice thing, and then she comes up in future content.
Maybe she's on Yavin 4 or something.
Yeah. And so I would really like to see that, but I think we're going to see a lot of these people are going to be killed. And we know that like Melchi, he's going to pop up again because he was in the trailer and he was the one who survived with Andor and Arkina 5, and also he's in Rogue One. So again, there's certain characters that the dramatic tension of them is not necessarily there. And I think the shame of it is that we are going to see a lot of the people we like die. And I thought there might be a chance that Brasso survives. He doesn't. And it makes the episodes feel like they have a lot more weight to them. And I think that it all culminating together is, as you say, you can kind of tell this is almost pseudo the main arc in air quotes, because Cassian ends up there. It's a fight against the Empire, which is what this whole show is about. A main character or a side character who's quite prominent in season 1, he dies, and you've kind of got these plot points which have connected. And I think that it was the one I was most thrilled about, because every time the Empire showed up, and you've either got Bix by herself, or you've got Brasso talking to his alleged friend, when you've got them, they're the scenes that you're really tense about. They're the ones you're seeing going, oh God, what's going to happen? When I watched it with Megan, she was like, she got the vibe that Brasso was going to die when he talks to B2 Emo. She was like, something bad's going to happen. And I just jokingly said, I was like, it's Andor. Something bad is obviously going to happen. This is not a happy ending show. But I think it shows the weight there, which I really like.
Yeah, I think the way it was handled was really interesting, because I write down a note of like, bloody stormtroopers missing again. But they held on that one guy, didn't they, lining up a shot? They held on it, and then he didn't ever shoot. And it's only after Cassian lands that you find out he's the stormtrooper who has shot and killed Brasso. Yeah, so that was really interesting, I think, as well, that they kind of honoured that character in the way that they did that. I found the scene when he is captured under arrest really interesting. When he's at the cafe, the restaurant, I'm not really sure what that place was, but again, it was our cantina stand-in, wasn't it, for this arc? I thought that was really interesting, because to me it played very straight that guy who had seemed like he was their mate the whole time had ultimately turned them in, because that's what Brasso says. He's like, oh yeah, wear us out and then turn us in. And I just took that as read. But then, I told you, this one article which I experienced to help me make sure I got all my thoughts in line. The writer, the author of that article, was arguing that they thought he was doing that to protect that guy.
They did give each other a look,
which I thought was a really interesting take on that scene, that actually he's just kind of giving out false information in order that they're now left alone, which sounds like a Brasso heroic rebel thing to do. I didn't pick up on it when I watched it, but I'm glad I read that, and I'm glad we're having that conversation. You can tell me what you think, because I think, again, that adds something to that character and to his sacrifice.
Yeah, I'm unsure. I think it is left to be ambiguous, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, did they just... When I didn't know what was going to happen, Brasso does give him a look after yelling at him and trying to punch him, and it's hard to tell if it was a look of, you're a piece of shit and I hate you, or I've got you, kind of thing. And then when I watched it again today, I still am not sure. I'm coming in two camps. I feel like it could be either, or even it could even be that he did rat out Brasso, and Brasso acted like that, almost like, well, your family don't deserve to die or injured or something. Because it did seem Brasso is obviously very calm. The only time we really see him lose his shit is the finale, which is when that twatty Imperial officer kicks B2 Emo over. And then as soon as that happened, when Meg and I rewatched it, she was like, I forgot about this bit. Yeah, you get him. Because when anyone hurts droids, she gets very animated about it. And Brasso just yells and just like clobbers them with bricks and stuff. Like, well, Marva's brick, he clobbers one of the Imperial officers with. That's the only time we've seen Brasso act in that way. And I did think it was quite, you're surrounded by what? 6, 7 stormtroopers? What? And you're going to potentially get yourself killed just to punch this guy in the face, potentially. Like, that seems like a pointless waste. If he was a Jedi or something, or a Sith, you'd kind of go, he's doing something because he's got something up his sleeve, but he's not. He's just a guy. So it did, I'm not sure, to be honest. I could see either way.
I like the ambiguity. It's good. It's interesting. It would make more sense. Wasn't there a drop line earlier about the fact that the guy's wife didn't approve of the daughter hanging out?
Yes. I thought it might have been her.
Maybe it was her, yeah. But they don't seem to lean into that at all. Again, it's sort of a line earlier on. But the ambiguity of the whole situation, I think, is interesting in itself.
Yeah. And then, do you want to talk about the big scene, or do you want to talk about Andor's entrance first?
Well, I think. Do we want to do chronologically? I suppose we'll talk about Bix, shall we? I think. Yeah. I'll give its own time, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'll first. I want to read out a little thing. I'll give the baton to you, but I want to read out something which specifically the actress who plays her. So Adria Arjona, she said this. It's a short quote. It's just felt really liberating to be able to do that. I had a lot of women in my heart at the time. For any women, for anyone, when you have a stranger, a male stranger, in your own space, everything becomes survival. And I think that, that's very powerful. And I know that online this has been the main scene that's been causing people a lot of discourse. And I can understand to a degree both sides. And the fact that Bix says the words, he tried to rape me. The fact that word, like, it's very heavily implied in the scene. But I feel like if she didn't say that, it's like, was he trying to? Adults would say yes.
Definitely, yeah.
But I feel like if they didn't say that, one could almost argue he was just crap at fighting and it was a terrible fight. And he was trying to get something out of her. And then once he couldn't, maybe he was just trying to fight her, even though I think most people would read it as not. But as soon as she says that, you go, no, there's no ambiguity there. Clearly what we all unfortunately suspected was happening was definitely happening. And they've never said that in Star Wars before. There's never been that kind of scene in Star Wars before. So I wondered how you felt about not only that, but also in episode 2, there was the interaction where he says to her about her husband. Does your husband know you're here? Does your husband think you're safe or something like that? Like, how did you feel about that whole situation?
Well, I do think it was kind of predictable. That's where it was going because of that initial interaction, or certainly we knew something else was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think because of the heavy imagery of the stylings of, the vehicles, like I said, the tanks and the behavior of the Imperial officers, I think what it was leaning into was kind of always going in that direction. When the scene actually happened, here's two guys. Let's talk about, let's have two guys talking about the women and the rights.
Well, that's what I want to read her quote first to say, like,
what can we do? We can only give our opinion, can't we?
Yeah.
But it started, and obviously he rubs her hand, doesn't he? He's getting into her personal space. And I don't think there's any ambiguity here. I think it's very clear that's what he was there to do.
Yeah.
That's why the other guy was left outside.
Yeah.
He's on the perimeter whilst I go in here and do this. I was unsure. I felt like it's leaning on a trope that I didn't know if we needed, if I'm honest. But then as the scene went on and it became this kind of scuffle and a kerfuffle and this kind of pulling hair and nails fight, and I mean that in not a derogatory way, in the way that, you're like fighting with every bit that you've got to
desperation.
Yeah, to get away from this man. I sort of then was turned around. I think I started to understand the value. I think I was worried, like, oh shit, this is a trope, and do we really need it? But then I think the decision's been made here to give Bix the opportunity to take her own power back,
100%
from a group of people who took that from her. So I think that's why we have that nightmare scene earlier, and I think absolutely the right decision that Andor comes back later. that he doesn't arrive just in the nick of time to save Bix from it, or neither does Will. I know he arrives back and he's shooting at the guy on the outside, but he doesn't save Bix. Bix has to save herself. So I think because of that, and it's added something to that Bix character, we'll only really know how successful it is when we see her again and what's happening to her and who she's become. But in the moment, just in that few minutes, I went through the whole gamut of like, oh, I'm not sure, to, okay, I totally, from my perspective, understand why they've chosen to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I was, again, I've seen the scene twice. And the first time I watched it, I was like, this is uncomfortable. It's meant to be, obviously. And I was like, because sometimes Star Wars, not Andor, but sometimes other Star Wars shows, they indicate things and then they lean off. You know, there's a lot of the times where the best example would be Han being tortured in Empire Strikes Back. You know he's being tortured. He screams. He comes out. He's been tortured. But you don't see him being tortured. You just know it's happened and they kind of mention it. So when I mentioned about obviously I can see this as happening, but it's more so her saying it took away any argument that wasn't happening. Whereas I think a lot of other Star Wars stuff, not saying there's been sexual assault, but in other Star Wars stuff, when something heinous is happening, I think sometimes they don't overtly put a spotlight on it, just either for younger viewers or for one reason or another to kind of go, if you missed how horrendous this is, okay, we're not going to make you look at it in the face. But the fact that she says it, you can't escape what's just happened to her. And I agree completely. I think the fact I was concerned, I was like, I don't want Andor to come down to save her again, because her whole, I think the link with what you said is very insightful with the nightmares. And I think that her nightmare in essence was that she didn't get herself out of that situation. Andor had to save her. The only way she really got out was because Andor saved her while essentially a riot was going on that Marva instigated. And so I think the fact that she was alone in this house with an Imperial officer and she knew what was happening, she said don't. She tried everything she could. And no matter what she tried to do, he was going to do that thing. It was an unavoidable situation from her perspective because he was a monster and he was abusing his power, as many people do. You know, the Nazis did it. People, you know, I'm not slating soldiers who are in active duty and things, but there are records of soldiers in modern day doing that kind of thing. So people in positions of power, if you're already a piece of shit and you're in the position of power and you want that certain thing and you feel some twisted way you deserve that thing, regardless of who wants to give it to you, those things do happen. And I think it's very important to show that the abuse of power happens in so many different ways, and that Bix needed to get out of the nightmare where she had no control. The only way to do that was for her to fight back. And it was, I liked the fact that it was a scuffle, as you say. It was desperate, but her resourcefulness, her refusing to give up, and her being underestimated were the things that made her win. Is a poor word, you know, very simplistic word for a situation like that, because whenever an individual goes through an experience like that, you never win. You know, you just lose less than the other person. But I think that she broke the chains there of the powerlessness she felt. And when she sees Andor at the end, it's relief, I think, as in, oh, Andor's here to get us all out of here, not Andor's my protector to save me. And again, she's the one who shoots the other guard. Will distracts him. She shoots him. So she's taken her power back from her assaulter, and then the person who would defend him, she's taken him down as well.
Yeah, and Bix shoots first too.
Exactly. And I think from here we're going to see Bix Prime, I think. And it was a horrible thing for her to go through, but I think that as far as narratively speaking goes, it was done in a very good way without it being, we've seen too many shows and movies where an assault occurs and the amount you see is so much, and you don't I don't need to see that kind of thing. With sexual assault, I don't need to see the whole thing ever. And I think that with that, what was good is it showed you enough of her being at the danger position without it being a case of going too far. Mm-hmm. So I think of a situation like that occurring.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I really liked that. And Bix is an incredible character. You saw that in season 1 and her resilience. And now I'm very excited to see where she goes.
Mm. Yeah, it was a brave decision, I think, for a show that is, I know it's the mature side of Star Wars, but still, I imagine there were some people that needed to be convinced that this was the right thing to do. Mm. But I think probably there were a lot of people working behind the scenes to make sure, it sounds like the actress herself as well, that this was handled in exactly the right way. And I think we're both agreeing that ultimately, hopefully it continues to pay off, but certainly for this moment in this end of this arc, it feels like mature filmmaking in service of the character rather than an exploitative moment to entertain or titillate the audience, for sure.
Definitely. And given that Bix is, the actress who plays her is an attractive woman, there's been lesser movies and stuff we've seen where this kind of situation becomes an excuse to derobe someone, which is horrendous. And that doesn't happen to her, which I really appreciate. You don't get her clothes ripping open and things like that. She, as a character and as an actress, does not get exploited in that way, which again, I respect because we've seen it. I mean, I like Game of Thrones, so I did apart from the last season, but it happened with Emilia Clarke in those earlier episodes. She gets assaulted. Obviously, she does eventually turn it back and she does take it back from Khal Drogo, but she does bear rule quite a lot in those scenes, and it's not pleasant to watch. And it does feel a lot of the time with shows like Game of Thrones, a lot of it is kind of gratuitous and not necessary, and even quite male gazy at points. So I found the scene in particular was quite respectful in that. And again, the actress, she is her words I spoke of, that she felt like it was powerful and it's something that needs to be seen. And there's a quote from Tony Gilroy where he says, sexual assault and rape is something that's happened all throughout history. It's horrendous, but he felt it was important to show that because so many other aspects of what happens to people with power and so many other things that happen when you've got this tyrannical government and things, there are individuals in that who would take advantage of it. And we've seen Andor shown the spectrum of it. Financial stuff, physical abuse, all kinds of ways. And now, because of this thing, it's really kind of showing that grounded approach of real social commentary of almost the whole spectrum of horrendous stuff that does and can happen to people. Yes. So we'll come off of this specific dark subject and come to Andor, his saving moment, coming down with the TIE Avenger and kind of taking names. Yeah, pew pew and blowing stuff up. Yeah. How do you feel about that? What do you kind of think of Andor's coming back and his kind of savior moment? Obviously, we get Brasso's death, which we've lightly touched upon, but how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it was fine. I mean, I don't. There wasn't much to it, really, was there? I mean, it was cool seeing things get blown up, and then he mourned Brasso. I mean, I like how it ended. Yeah. I think the intercutting, as you said, back to Mon dancing with the music, because then the music then becomes non-diegetic because it's over both scenes, which is really interesting. We're seeing the mourning of Brasso. They're getting onto the ship and flying away, with that same music playing. So. Yeah, very interesting filmmaking, and the way that the three characters are kind of aligned, not sure where their next part of their journey is. I think, we keep talking about, but we don't. I mentioned about how that maybe the shuttle is kind of symbolic of Cassian himself, and we've gone from that opening scene of like being totally at odds with it, and this being new and not knowing what to do. Perhaps this is symbolic of him, and now he's in total control of this ship over this time. He's twisting all these different bits of the steering mechanisms, isn't he, and flying around and blowing up the bad guys and sweeping in and escaping. And so, yeah, again, probably that's all very deliberate, I would have thought, and that he's taking away a female character and a young character. Again, I think probably is quite deliberate. I think it makes sense that Brasso is the one that goes. He's unfortunately of the group the most expendable because we need the next generation. And we need to reflect, the different types of people that are being involved in this rebellion. So Cassian is, for all intents and purposes, a white guy. I know he's multicultural white guy, but he is a white guy. So Brasso's another white guy. So unfortunately he can go.
Yeah, I think with Andor being the one to steer them out, he's the one. He's the kind of leader in a sense. I mean, you've got I think thinking of the rebellion, the only kind of white person really in it, aside from Brasso, is actually Luthen Rail. So it's like he's the puppet master at the top, and then under him is Cassian, who, because Diego Luna, I think he's of Latin American descent, I think.
Yeah, I think he's Argentinian, I think, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. So and I think that's interesting as well. Obviously, I don't think they had this scene in mind and thinking about that when they were casting people in Andor Series 1, but it is good in that regard.
Oh, Mexican, sorry, I just looked it up.
Mexican, there we go. And so with that in mind, I think it's good of having people of colour in that scene, but also you've got the three of them, as you say, and Andor is the one guiding them. He's the older one, he's the more experienced one. As we saw, his whole plot line with the people on Yavin 4, they all didn't know what they were kind of doing. And then he's like, okay, I'm literally and figuratively steering the ship now. Brasso had the experience, he had that, dad energy. He's gone. So now I have to do it. And that's a lot of weight to carry. And I think he kind of sees that going forward, his kind of the look he was giving. It's funny with Diego Luna because I have no slight on him as an actor, but when I think of him, I don't think of him as an amazing actor. I just think of him, he's pretty good. But it's funny because I think Cassian as a character he's a good narrative force, but as a character, I'm like, I like him. I don't love him. I don't connect with him on that sort of level. But I think what makes Diego Luna a good actor is when you see Diego Luna outside of Star Wars, he's being interviewed. His personality is completely different to Cassian. He's really smiley and really energetic and a lot of mannerisms. And Andor's like the exact opposite. It's
like Hugh Jackman, the showman, versus Hugh Jackman, Wolverine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's like, Hugh Jackman is almost closer to Deadpool's personality in real life than he is to Wolverine's, which is quite funny. Yeah, I liked that element. I thought that was good. And so...
And, we touched upon the idea, didn't we, before of just that we're sort of finishing this off, aren't we? But yeah, apologies for the mix-up in his heritage. But, that adds even more weight to it now, doesn't it? For him to be Mexican, playing a refugee, with a government not wanting to let them protect him, trying to get rid of him. We've got our own issues in our country with those ideas that have been going on over the last few years. But that's pretty deliberate and pretty powerful, I think, as well. We spoke, we don't want to talk too much about other shows, but, Fisk and Daredevil and who he's clearly representing.
Yes.
I think we've got a similar thing going on here.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. It's almost like Born Again is like the early days of what can happen when you let the wrong person in on a citywide level, a domestic level, and then Andor is like, here's the consequence of what happens if you leave this unchecked. If you let a Fisk in power for too long, you can get a Palpatine. And that's a very scary situation. So I think the last elements to talk about here really is the Imperial side, which is Dedra and Syril. Or as Megan says, cereal. So we've got two sides, really. We've got the first episode, which is you've got Dedra when she interacts with Orson Krennic. So obviously he's one of the main antagonists in Rogue One. He does pop up in other Star Wars media as well. Very minor spoiler, but he does pop up in Bad Batch for an arc there, which is really interesting. And so he's been a favourite of Palpatine's for a while. Obviously, he's always at odds with Tarkin, and Tarkin's always above him slightly. But it's quite interesting talking about the Gorman stuff, because again, I say there's a Gorman situation that occurs in Rebels, which will happen and is all building up to this in Andor, and it's going to be horrendous, I can assure you. And so we get that kind of first scene. So we'll talk about the two separate parts of Dedra. So we've got the first bit of Dedra, which is with Krennic, and then we've got the second part with her and Syril, which I did not expect. So, with the part with I'll talk about the bit of Krennic first, and then you can add on anything else, and then I'll let you kickstart the Syril part, and then we'll start to wrap. So I liked the scene. I thought it was interesting, showing that the kind of old school style of like American advertising things, like here in Gorman, we like to do things this way, and we've got the best silks around, and you know what makes us so special? Those folks down there who work really hard. It's like that quite, the sort of mid 20th century propaganda machine of American filmmaking and stuff, things that would play before like movies and stuff. I really liked that, and you can see all of the Imperial officers are looking at each other going, what the fuck is this? Why is he making us watch this? There's more important things. And then it kind of all comes together. But there's a specific part which is I think it's my last bit of lore dumping in this episode. which is about the Ministry of Enlightenment. So the Ministry of Enlightenment, there are the two, let's call them dweebs.
They're like the hype guys, the influencers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good way to put them. Yeah, who are coming in and going, yeah, we can do this and we can twist that. You know how the Gormans, you know how they actually did this? That never happened. That was us. And everyone's looking around like, okay, we've got more important things to worry about than you're tweaking. But so the Ministry of Enlightenment, they're a propaganda machine, and they're not mentioned elsewhere in the canon as of yet. However, there are other ministries that are mentioned as part of Palpatine's reign. So what happened after Palpatine took over of the in Revenge of the Sith became the Empire, the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, or Comp Nor, came about. And essentially that's Palpatine reorganizing the Republic. And one of the elements of that that's quite important is the Ministry of Information. So the Ministry of Information is in the book Tarkin. I think that's where it's first mentioned. It is in Rogue One Catalyst, or Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, which is all about how things of Rogue One kind of occurred behind the scenes from the Imperial perspective a lot of the time. And then there's also a new book trilogy which is started by Alexander Freed. People on YouTube might be able to see it just in the background there. That's the first one. It's called Reign of the Empire. Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear. Now, I must confess I've not read it yet because I've been trying to finish up the High Republic before delving into that. But I did a bit of research on it, and essentially it's about showing the very first couple of years, I think it's the first year and a half, after the Empire takes over, and what Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and other characters do when once the Senate really doesn't have any power anymore. And so the Ministry of Information does play quite a big role in that. And it's essentially the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Enlightenment, they're propaganda machines. They're turning of how did you make it so the Empire, that scene in A New Hope where it was like, oh, the ancient religion. And people like the Jedi, they've all been extinct for ages. It's been less than 2 decades, mate. How did these kinds of questions happen? How did the state of the galaxy go from where it was in Revenge of the Sith to Rogue One and then the original trilogy sort of thing? So I just found that quite interesting of the more we explore it in the canon, is the more that, Palpatine is the ultimate mastermind. He's just got everything kind of figured out and all these different sectors. And, I'm not saying there is, but it would definitely not surprise me to find out that certain powerful Western governments in this world have secretive little meetings with secretive little departments that like to spin certain things. That has happened throughout history, whether it be governments or dictatorships. There's propaganda is a huge part and a huge strength of rallying the public behind you. And I just think it's very good to literally show it and literally have it going, no, here they are. They're dickheads, these two people who do it, and they're bragging about it. So I thought that was interesting. And then the stuff about the Gorman spider and the silks, that's going to be quite interesting there. So what do you think about that scene as a whole and Dedra's part and etc.?
I really, really enjoyed that scene. I thought it was really, really powerful and really, as much as the Bix one in its own way, just so well written and handled in terms of the commentary that was coming through, I thought was fantastic. A bunch of men sitting around a table making decisions on behalf of a whole galaxy is what it boils down to. But again, it's one scene. And I think that's where these moments work, where we've discussed maybe where some other things have been a bit too elongated, the rebel infighting that takes over, most of Cassian's arc here. This is one scene and we get the message pretty quick. I think Deirdre's the only woman there.
Yes, I believe so.
And it's very kind of clear. They don't feel like she should be there. She's made this big mistake, hasn't she, with going after Axis, and she's still kind of being punished for that. But she's such, as a character, she's such a powerful presence that you were just drawn to her. And that's the actress as well, I think. I agree. Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma is absolutely wonderful. But I think Deirdre is the kind of other side of that coin. I think she is just as impressive and just as powerful in everything that she does. I totally buy that she is this person. I kind of, is this the right word? I kind of like her. I don't. I hate her, but I kind of want.
You're kind of rooting for her almost.
I sort of want to spend time with her and see what's going on because she's forging her own path through this kind of horrible, patriarchal, narcissistic, misogynistic empire. So it's really interesting. I think, she's wonderful. I think, and you can see how much she's holding herself together all the time.
Well, that's what Denise Goff, the actress who plays her, she has said specifically when being interviewed about season 1, she was like, I wanted a show, a woman in the Empire is not that high up. It's not that common, but I want her to be a fully formed woman of a full character. And I think in these couple of scenes we do get to see that a bit more. But yeah, I'm rooting for her. Season 1, I loved the Mothma stuff, but for me, season 1, aside from the big moments of the end of the heist and the end of the prison arc, outside of those kind of moments and then Marva's speech in the finale, really my main bits I was enjoying the most was seeing Dedra navigate the Empire when she's clearly the smartest one in the room, clearly the one who has the best idea. She's correct. She knows what's going on, but no one's listening to her. And then her, along with Mothma, who's basically kind of her equivalent. I love their scenes in season 1 were my favourites throughout all of them.
And to be fair to Krennic, he sees that, they have the conversation at the window. All felt very like Red Skull First Avenger.
Yeah.
When he's got that kind of mountain hideaway that they storm. Maybe they just reuse some old, CGI backdrops from that or something. I don't know. But yeah, I loved that scene when he's like, I know you've already got a plan and I know it's better than what's being said. I thought that was really interesting that, he is able to see that in her. There are people who are, he'll take the credit for it, but there are people who do see that in her. There were a few moments as well earlier on where I wondered, when they're talking about Gorman, she looks very uncomfortable and squirmy. So I didn't know if it was going to be revealed that was the planet she was from. But of course, we do then get her backstory when they say that her parents died and she was basically raised in an Imperial orphanage. But it sounded more like a kind of Imperial training facility for setting you on this path. It doesn't sound like it was
calling it
much
akin to
fun.
something again. I think it was quite Nazi-ish. Maybe think of the youth.
100%. So yeah, I didn't know. I thought that was going to be quite an interesting angle. She had to take over. Maybe it will still be that's where her heritage is. I don't know. I thought that'd be quite interesting that if she has to be the person who's bringing about the downfall of these people, and she's going to choose to do that, even though that's where she's originally from. I don't know. I thought that might be where it was going. I guess it remains to be seen. I think she's brilliant, and I really love those scenes. I was less enamored with the rest of her arc in the 3 episodes, if I'm honest.
It didn't go where I expected.
No. Fun factor, yeah, I get it. It's kind of funny to think about her and Syril together. Mr. Thunderbird himself, the way he looks and walks.
To be fair, he looks, I think in this series, he looks a lot more attractive and a lot better. He looks a lot fuller now. I was like, you're actually like a not bad looking chap. Not that sounds like everything I always say about people appearances, but like in the first one, he's like a dweeby little boy, but now he's like, you seem like
the whole galaxy, Mike.
I'm terrible, aren't
I? No, I get it. It's a fun way to bring those two characters back and put them in a situation you didn't expect. Did I care a jot about any of that stuff? No.
Really? I loved it. I was so enamored by it.
I liked her speech to Syril's mum, how she took control of that situation. Again, I think that was good, and it's another facet to her character that we can see that of her controlling every situation she's in. But it felt fun and throwaway. Is any of that going to matter? I can't see it particularly mattering. So sort of when we were there, I was like, I'd rather be somewhere else.
I know what you mean, but I feel like, again, I think this whole episode is kind of the converter between season 1 and season 2. This is really like wrapping up loose ends. I think we're not really going to see Syril and his mum much again together, apart from maybe like the last conversation they have or something. Because I think what's basically going is like, here's who Syril was before, Ferrix and Dedra, and here's how Dedra has basically got him away from his mum. Because I feel like if that conversation didn't happen, whatever Syril and Dedra's story is going to be in the next few arcs, most people will be like, what's happening with him and his mum? Has she just been completely ignored? And it's like, no, Dedra's sorted that now. The conversation with his mum from now on is going to be fairly civil and quite boring. So we're not really going to have to see them again. So I think that's what it served. And I think, again, it showed that Syril, when he's laying on the bed, when it's like he thinks of himself as quite moral, but he really is still just a boy.
Yeah, he's like George Michael in Arrested Development, that famous meme of him walking home when he's like really depressed and sad. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Cera's character in that's great. But I think that what it's showing is, Dedra's control of every situation. But I think what this may show now. Have you seen the trailers for the Andor? Okay,
I have not.
There's a split second thing that you see in it. I can tell you if you want.
Yeah,
okay.
Go for it.
So minor spoilers, but there's a scene where you see Dedra and she's clutching at her throat and sweating a lot in one scene for literally like a second, just kind of doing that. A lot of people looked at that and thought Vader's force choking her, which it could be. I hope it's not, but it might be. But I don't think they would have shown that in the trailer if it was Vader force choking her. My suspicion from that one image is that she's going to find out about the Death Star and she is going to hate it. And she's going to like a lot of Imperials, their response to the Death Star, finding out what it was, really turned the tide for the Rebels a lot because so many Imperials started to defect. When they find out that the Empire will obliterate an entire planet, and one of the main planets, let's not forget, Alderaan is a huge, huge factor in it. It would almost be like America taking out like London or something like that. It's a huge part of it. And I wonder if she's going to find out about that and going to become very conflicted, as many Imperials do, and having like a panic attack of like, what do I do? I've invested my life in this Imperial machine, which I believe in the Order, but I can't support a planet-destroying weapon. It can't work. It goes beyond order and becomes tyranny. And that's really the change that happens, I think, in the original trilogy. So I wonder if showing that side of her of Syril is going to show her maybe not defect from the Empire, but potentially make one decision right near the end that's just going to turn the tide a tiny bit. Just a drop. You know what I mean? Because a lot of elements happen like that with Scarif. Just because seeing her smile and putting clothes on and her interaction with Syril is like, we could see them together.
Preparing how she was going to look for when the mum came in was like... It
makes her more of a person.
Yeah.
You know, in season one.
What those scenes... Sorry to interrupt. That's what those scenes, I think, were about. We've spoken already about adding these shades of grey to both sides, that good guys have to do bad things and bad guys are ultimately just people. But again, I sort of, fine. Yeah, all right. But did I need... I think I'm in the minority. I think most people really enjoyed these scenes.
I mean, did you like the scenes in season one where Syril was talking to his mum? Did you enjoy them?
They were fine. But
so, that's probably why. I think a lot of people. I think it's
really more the Syril character. I don't
Megan
really
hates him.
Care for.
She doesn't care about him at all.
I'm not sure what he's adding. I don't know what his value add is. Dedra, lots of value added. In fact, one of the most important people in the show. I'm not sure I want to see a face turn, if I'm honest. I'm not sure I want to see her turn good, but I mean, if they do it, I'm sure they'll handle it in a better way than I could, and I can imagine in my head at the moment. But Syril, if he hadn't have come back this season, I wouldn't have noticed. I wouldn't have missed him.
I think that's kind of the point. When you see him introduced, he's got the promotion and he's introducing that guy in the data place and he's being all self-important. I think for me, I guess it's just kind of showing with the baddies. You've got to have people at the top like Krennic and Tarkin and the Emperor who are like the planners and the strategists and the controllers. Then you have the middle management, people like Dedra, who are really switched on people who really are the reason why the Empire kind of works. The only way these people with like Krennic with his big cape, the only way people like that can really work when his delusions of grandeur is with people in middle management who've got the drive to really do a lot. And then you also have to have people below them that are the little dweebs who are like, I'm not saying this about all parking wardens, but like the kind of person who like you get back to your car within 30 seconds of the ticket running out and they wait and they can see you coming and they go, nope, I'm still giving you a ticket because you broke the rule. And it's like, but you're exerting any tiny iota of power they have just because they don't have any power anywhere else. There are people like that who are like, no, I must follow the rules beyond everything else. And I think Cyril's that. Dedra's beyond that in basically every way. And then Krennic is kind of above that, not beyond, above that in the pecking order. And I think the three of them are really going to kind of show the workings of the Empire in that way. That's how I kind of feel about it. But I think that the Dedra Syril thing, I would have been happy if them not getting together. You know, when I rewatched the finale of season one, I was like, I wrongly thought that they kissed, but they don't in season one. And when I watched it, I'm like, oh, I'm glad they don't after he saves her. I'm glad that they don't. But now that they're dating, I'm like,
I definitely don't need a sex scene.
Oh God, I'm certain there won't be. I'm certain I would be very surprised if there was.
Let's not break that boundary in Star Wars. And if we're going to do it, not with those two.
No, thank you. No, but yeah, that's what I think. I quite like Syril.
And I definitely don't want that fondue either. That looked rank.
It did look rank, didn't it? Yeah, I don't know what fondue that was. It almost looked like fish paste. Pinky fish paste. But I think that's kind of the point. But I did like the scene where you've got like Dedra, where they've got the cakes, and then the mum is just like stabbing it with a spoon, and it's like she's got no tact. Nothing is delicate to her. So I think it's probably got a lot to it there. But yeah, I don't need many more Syril Dedra scenes. I don't want Dedra's strength in the Imperial Security Bureau to be exchanged for silly little conversations with her and Syril that don't
like a sitcom or like a relationship drama or anything like that.
No, this is all I want from that. And apart from major narrative decisions, I wouldn't be surprised if because it's going to be years. So the next thing's in a year.
Yeah.
So if what happens is that they have a relationship falling out and he does something stupid, annoying and petty that maybe causes the rebellion to win, or vice versa, I think it's less likely that she would do it in that way. But like, I wonder if there's going to be a conflict between them that's going to kind of either be caused by or get in the way of them doing essential work to catch Andor, and that's how he slips away.
And we've talked about reflections, haven't we? And about, Dedra and Mon being reflections. Maybe we're kind of seeing a little bit here of Bix and Cassian. What we don't really know the clarity of what their relationship is. I know she called him her husband, but that was obviously the front in but where they're at. What are we seeing? The kind of Bix and Cassian and the Dedra and Syril? Are we seeing another kind of mirroring there? I don't know. Like, we've got to have faith, haven't we? Because what Gilroy's done up until this point has been pretty flawless. We've been a little bit nitpicky, probably me a bit more tonight about these opening 3 episodes. But by and large, this has been the show which we need to not put on a pedestal, but hold up in regard in terms of he's mastered being in control of all the elements and where they all go. So I'm sure there's a purpose to it, and I look forward to seeing what it is. I just don't need many more of these kind of distracting scenes. Like, if it goes somewhere in a year's time and they are still together and Cyril's got another promotion and perhaps she's helping him up the chain, and perhaps that will come back and bite her because she keeps getting her boyfriend or her husband promoted and actually he's a complete douche and everybody in the Empire hates him. I guess I can kind of see that with, again, another abuse of power. And so, there is plenty of interesting ways it can go, I'm sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if she was kind of using him, because where he is in this data center, I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of like she uses him to sift through Imperial data without anyone catching her. And maybe he finds out in one of the later episodes and be like, have you been using me this entire time? And she's like, yes.
Yeah, good shout.
I don't have any real human emotion. I didn't want you. I literally could see the only way to get to this point is to have you in the data center. I don't think she'd say that as dialogue, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was context. And I think that would be very good, because you'd be like, God, you did all that for those many steps ahead. But yeah, I think because where I rewatched Andor Series 1, it makes it better. I think a lot of the Filoni stuff, Ahsoka I liked, but it wasn't amazing. Acolyte was obviously Leslie Headland's thing, and that was heavily flawed, even though it had some cool moments. And then a lot of Filoni, the Mandoverse stuff, like, I enjoy it, but it's easy to pick holes in. There's a lot of faults to it. There's a lot of things you're like, why have you done this? This episode doesn't make sense, all that. Andor doesn't have any bad episodes. Andor doesn't even really have any bad scenes. It has the odd scene or odd moment where you're like, oh, maybe, does that work? And then sometimes you go, oh, in the long term, as you say, it did. And other times you go, oh, maybe that few seconds didn't work perfectly, but in the grand scheme of things, it worked out great. So, as you say, I have faith in Gilroy. I hope that when he's finished with Andor, he's got another non-Star Wars project afterwards, but I'm hoping he'll come back. I don't want the Filoni to have ultimate control over Star Wars. I like Filoni stuff. He did Rebels and Clone Wars, which is great, but I think we need Gilroys in the Star Wars universe to keep it going, because I would trade 3 Filoni projects. I'd trade all the Mandoverse for one more season of Andor, easy, to be honest.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know if you read similar articles, but very clear in how he felt about the idea of doing this for 5 years, wasn't he? He was like, no, I think my next season will be 3 episode arcs. They'll all represent the year. I don't think I'll be coming back for another 4 years, thanks. So, I think he's probably enjoyed his time and he knows he's made something of note and of quality, but he might be hard to tempt back, I reckon.
Yeah, I think Kathleen Kennedy said that they'll, now that everything's finished, she said, like, he said that he loved it because of the resources and the amount of people who watch it, whereas obviously a lot of his own stuff you make, you haven't got a guaranteed amount of people going to watch stuff, and the amount of talent and resources and like freedom to kind of do what you want with. And what I would say is, what I'd love is if you had a council of people on Star Wars. Gilroy would just be on that, and he would be the executive supervisor of certain projects just to guide them. And even if you had more like other serious filmmakers coming in and serious writers, and even if Gilroy isn't overtly there the day to day, he is guiding one half of Star Wars, and then Filoni's guiding the other half of Star Wars. That's what I would like it to be in the long term, but depends what he does, you know? So the Russo brothers, they're like, yeah, we're done with Marvel now, cool. And then everything they've made since is absolutely tanked, and now they're coming back, and it's like, I don't want that for Gilroy. I don't want him to put his hard work into stuff that everyone hates. But, you know, it's that kind of thing where it's almost a home run in certain ways. If you make Star Wars content, even if everyone hates it, people still watch it. So, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
I don't think so. We keep getting these little moments, don't we, between Mon's cousin, and that was quite a nice callback. Was it?
And Cinta, yeah.
Cinta came back.
Yeah.
That was quite a nice little callback. I thought it was, one moment was more like that was comedic, was that those two factions ended up basically playing rock, paper, scissors on Yavin 4 to decide who was going to be in charge. But no, I think there's probably lots of little moments like that we could spend the next 6 hours talking about, but I think we certainly covered all the most monumental moments of the episodes, and I think where it feels like it's lining itself up for the next. I think it's a really interesting concept. You know, it's brand new. I don't think anybody's ever done this before. This idea of covering this big space of time through these little pockets. It'd be interesting if some episodes, some little groupings of 3 are set over a longer period of time within the year. It could be that, you know,
I hope so. I don't want it just to be 3 days.
This next little run, it could be one is January, one is July, one is November. It could be, for all we know, across the 3 episodes. We just don't know. So I don't know Star Wars months. I don't know what their calendar is, if I'm honest.
I think it depends. I think with the Empire taking over, the Empire has like a general calendar over everything, but also each individual planet does, because, you know, a year is actually dependent on the planet's rotation around their sun.
Yeah.
So they say rotations, which is the Star Wars term for year. But what's interesting is at the start of this, it said 4 BBY, which I think is the first time in any Star Wars content in the canon that's on screen that overtly says the out of universe year, because no one in universe says BBY, because no one in universe knows it's 4 years before there's going to be the Battle of Yavin.
Good point. Yeah,
and it's never been said. It's quite a Legends thing to do. In all the canon books, it's quite rare for it to even tell you the year it is. It's normally a reference book says the High Republic is 200 years before the Phantom Menace. Well, the Phantom Menace is confirmed as this amount of years before this amount of years before that, this amount of years before that. So by working back, I know the dates of all the Star Wars content, because I know that date 0 is A New Hope, and 19 years before that was Revenge, and then 3 years Attack of the Clones, and 10 years. But this is the first time, I think. But it's quite a Legends thing. In all Legends novels, you read them at the start, it's got, this happens in year, you read the Heir to the Empire.
They have a little map at the front of the book, don't they, actually? The little timeline map of what's going on.
Yeah, they don't do that in canon. Yeah. But that's what when I read Heir to the Empire, each chapter starts telling you how many months it is, and I'm like, I don't understand this at all. But yeah, I liked that. I'm excited to see where this goes, and obviously you've hit the ground running with the first episode, and now you can watch the rest of them without having to catch up, whereas Spider-Dan, Math and Dave, they all have to keep on watching.
Yeah, it's the only thing that, you know, I think you and I spoke before recording, wasn't it? Like, it's worked out fine, but it's kind of nice to be able to watch something without feeling like you have to rush it. And I said to you, like, I got towards the end of episode 2 last night, and I was feeling a little bit sleepy, and I was like, this needs my attention. I want to give this my attention. So yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm really glad we've done it. I'm glad that I could come on and talk to you. But it might be, the pacing might be a bit nicer for me now. I've got my block out of the way. Yeah,
I'll let you message me about stuff. I won't message you. I think for me, what I would want is almost them to do 2 episodes of the arcs, do 2 episodes one week, the finale the next week, 2 episodes the following week, the finale the next. So we've actually, instead of being 4 weeks, you've got 8 weeks, but it's just the first 2 and then the 1, then 2, but the 1. That's what I would probably have preferred if I had ultimate choice. But Gilroy did say the release order was very specifically Disney called for that.
Isn't there? So we've just had Daredevil, haven't we? It's really, really fortunately ended just as Andor's died.
Well,
so I'm sure
they planned it that way.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I'm sure in another month's time they've got something else that's
it
in the release.
Well, I think it's summer blockbusters. I think that's because we've got I think Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts is out in May, and then Fantastic Four is June or July. So I think that's probably why they're doing it. I think they're like, right, while people who consume Marvel and Star Wars a lot of them are the same people. So let's not do what we did with Solo or other films and other projects, which is oversaturated. Let's just go, okay, this month is Star Wars month. This month is Daredevil month. That's why with Daredevil, it's like 2 episodes, and then one episode, 2 episodes, and 1 episode, then 2 episodes, to make sure for Andor. But yeah, there's been delightful chatting with you, Jack. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I'll put all your links in the description. People need to check out Back to the Filmography. Obviously, if people want to check out your back catalogue, there's Seasons Greetings on the Comics in Motion Network and all kinds of other great stuff that you're up to. There's your Letterboxd. I Am Jack's Music, which you do a lot on that. I noticed you've done. I think the last few films you've rated are quite poor. A lot of 1 stars with just like one sentence going, yeah, this was very good. Yeah, which is quite entertaining to read.
My time.
100%. But yeah, anything else of where people can find you?
No, I mean I am on the socials, but I'm so inactive nowadays. I kind of lurk, and then if somebody wants to directly say anything, we'll get back to them. But I don't really. I sort of post to say there's a new episode out, and that's about it, if I'm honest.
100%.
So yeah, all the things you've already mentioned is the best way to get involved in anything that I'm doing.
Perfect. Well, friends, support me where you can. Share this wherever you're listening to it. Please follow at Genuine Chit-Chat, and also, more importantly, the new stuff at Star Wars Chit-Chat. So on Instagram, that's where it is. On YouTube, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, it's youtube.com/Star Wars Chit-Chat. All of the Andor episodes are going to be out on the Star Wars Chit-Chat feed exclusively, and I've also got a Revenge of the Sith commentary that me, Dave, and Math did. We watched the entirety of Revenge of the Sith, and we recorded the entire time, so you can press play while you're watching Revenge of the Sith, and you get to hear our thoughts in real time. So that's going to be coming out this weekend as well. So I've got a heavy few days of editing upon me. And then once Andor is over, there will be Clone Wars conversations, the redos. They're going to be coming out, which are going to be nicely edited versions for YouTube. But you can listen to all of that back catalogue on the podcast feed of Star Wars Chit-Chat. And we are up to Clone Wars Legacy, so doing all the unreleased stuff. So Son of Dathomir comic, the Dark Disciple book, the 4 unreleased episodes. And then we will be getting on to Season 7 of the Clone Wars. Already got that all recorded. And then after that, the sky's the limit. Plenty more Star Wars content coming your way. But friends, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like, share, subscribe, comment, tell us what you thought. And we will speak to you next week with Andor, and in a few days with the Revenge of the Sith commentary. And of course, may the Force be with you.